Your Honor is going to hear about Diablo, Overwatch, and others. It's not exactly what you'd expect to hear in court, but it is what's going on because of the FTC trial regarding Activision Blizzard being acquired by Microsoft. Now, the thing is, there have been depositions that are under oath from key business leaders in the industry, and from this we really have learned quite a lot of fascinating stuff. As an example, that Bobby Kotick withheld Call of Duty from Xbox until they paid up and actually gave him a better split. Yeah, Bobby basically playing hardball. We've got that Microsoft rewrote a deal with Disney after buying ZeniMax, that Jim Ryan believed that this acquisition has never actually been about exclusivity, and that is just stuff we learned on the very first day. So this trial is about pausing the deal from going through ahead of its deadline so that the FTC can more fully evaluate before the antitrust hearing in August. And everything shown in the next few days is just a fraction of what they're going to be talking about during the August hearing, which is where things will be quite massive. And for this, full credit really has to go to the coverage of The Verge, Kotaku, Axios, and in particular IGN, whose people have been, let's just say, going through hours and hours and hours of content to actually bring out the key things from these depositions. Pretty much every one of the executives was asked to define what a AAA game even is, and they did their best to do so without saying that they were good and that anything not AAA was bad. Just one of the many awkward exchanges that kept on going on in this. There were frequent requests to define the position of the Switch and cloud gaming in the general gaming market. And the whole definition of what the relevant market is was very key here, where the FTC wants to frame the Switch as being outside of the competition of Microsoft and Sony, and that the cloud is a separate market that will need to be developed as well. Whereas Microsoft wants to define the Switch as yet another console that they are losing to. Obviously, if you compare Switch sales to Xbox sales, Switch is heavily on top. And they also want to consider cloud gaming as an element of the wider gaming market that is small and irrelevant. You may be thinking, but wait, Microsoft have went heavy into cloud. Why do they want to frame it as being small and not relevant? Well, that's because if Microsoft has their dominant market-leading position in something that in the big picture is small and irrelevant, then Microsoft don't necessarily have to worry about antitrust coming down on them for that particular thing. So today we're going to learn a bunch about Sony, a bunch about Activision, a bunch about Microsoft. Let's just get stuck in. We absolutely have to start off with the Bobby Bombshell. Bobby Kotick demanded that Activision gets a better revenue split for Microsoft, and he actually said that they have to get this before they would develop Call of Duty titles for the Xbox Series S and X. That's the degree of hardball that Bobby has been willing to play, and he suggested that they already had a deal with Sony for better revenue share. So quite evidently, Bobby understanding that Call of Duty is like one of the #1 third-party games, that Call of Duty itself holds a lot of weight, and that the idea of withholding Call of Duty to extract better terms from these companies, that is something that he can go and do. Quite shocking, really. I suppose if you think about Call of Duty being on Steam, right? Well, ultimately you think about that, and Steam actually gives you a 20% cut, I believe, if you have over $50 million in revenue, which obviously a game like Call of Duty will indeed have. Anyway, with this, Microsoft actually did back down. They said time was limited. We had players whose expectations we wanted to meet, so we ultimately made the decision that was the best thing for the business. Yeah. So Microsoft actually gave in to Bobby Kotick's demands because ultimately they knew Call of Duty, like, if they didn't have it, they'd be in trouble. And the problem is that that undermines a core claim from them, where Microsoft is arguing that Call of Duty is not an essential title. If it's not an essential title, then why did they give special terms whenever Bobby decided to play hardball with that IP? We also then discovered Call of Duty Warzone Mobile. That's going to be something they'll be launching in the autumn. And it's kind of interesting. Bobby Kotick said it's a second chance. He explicitly said that he made a bad judgment in not bringing Call of Duty to the Switch. He basically compared the Wii and the Switch in this quote from VGC, saying that he made a bad judgment, that when he saw a prototype for the Switch, it was different than when he saw a prototype for the Wii, and thought that it was the most extraordinary video game console ever created. And he said, when I saw prototypes for Switch, I was concerned because they were trying to accomplish a lot with a console that had portable capability. I didn't think it was going to be widely successful. So kind of interesting that Kotick maybe has some regrets over where Call of Duty has went. There's obviously been some talk about the feasibility of Call of Duty on Switch, which has of course been tied up in this entire thing as Microsoft is trying to say that the Switch is a part of a broader market that they have a very weak position in. So basically, from the Activision perspective, Bobby playing hardball and actually winning, because, whether we like it or not, winning is something that Kotick does actually continue to do. Maybe in spite of himself, but he still does manage it, even though, of course, I think about the Overwatch League and the Call of Duty League, how they were quite a personal thing for him, it seemed, and how both of them have had quite a lot of drama. But to move on from Sony then, early on in this trial, there was an email shown by the Microsoft team that highlighted that Jim Ryan, in the days after the acquisition was announced, had said, amongst other things, that it's not an Xbox exclusivity play at all. This was a private email to a PlayStation executive who currently we know as Find Name, so, it's kind of redacted who that is. Anyway, Jim Ryan's deposition did continue along this thread, saying that apparently they were still confident in a deal until August of 2022, at which point an unrevealed email is detailed as causing Jim Ryan to decide that the deal would not, in fact, keep things business as usual at all. So essentially that Ryan wasn't particularly worried about things, but something changed because he saw an email that supposedly detailed that Sony would get access to the likes of Overwatch, but would not get access to, say, Overwatch 2. And I think that is potentially what began to make him worried. But of course, exclusives are something that Sony are very big on, right? They invest a lot of money in that, because otherwise in Jim Ryan's testimony, he was very quick to convey his belief that exclusives as a concept are not anti-competitive, that it just depends on the game. And when asked about Redfall and Starfield, he said, I don't like it regarding them being Xbox exclusives now, but I have fundamentally no quarrel with it. I don't like it, but I don't view it as anti-competitive. Now that we've got a bit of a look into the sorts of things that were worrying Ryan, we actually get to another thing, which basically is trade secrets. Because here's the thing, if Activision is an independent party, and we're talking about the PlayStation 6, well, it's reasonable enough that when, say, developing the big new Call of Duty that'll be launching on the big new PlayStation, that, yeah, Activision would get a look at that console so they're actually able to, well, get the dev kit, do everything, right, actually have a successful launch. But, well, then there's a bit of a problem. Because if Microsoft owns Activision, then Microsoft can get access to all of that information. Now, you may say, but what about Mojang? What about Minecraft? I mean, Minecraft is multi-platform. Does that not give Microsoft access to a bunch of Sony information? Well, sadly, we cannot see through this redaction, but Ryan's deposition actually is that is the experience of working with Mojang post-acquisition, and that does actually support his concerns. And we can then see this from the flip side, where actually Phil Spencer said that the reason why there is no PlayStation 5 native version of Minecraft, it's just the PS4 version, right? That's actually because Microsoft never received dev kits for that console, which again is likely because of the sorts of concerns that Ryan had there, which is quite interesting. Now, there's a few other things that we did learn as well. So, The Verge spotted, because of some pretty damn poorly redacted documents, that in 2021, 1 million people play Call of Duty on their PlayStation and nothing else, as in, the PlayStation for them is just the Call of Duty box. And that a total of 6 million people spend at least 70% of their time using their PlayStation on Call of Duty. Yes, Call of Duty is massive, and it's no surprise then that Call of Duty is worth $800 million in the US alone for Sony Interactive Entertainment. Yeah, just having that Activision product is making them almost $1 billion because of their store fee, right? Quite something. And then we also learned some development budgets, which I really love to see. The Last of Us Part 2. That cost $220 million and took 200 developers, whereas Horizon Forbidden West had 300 developers and cost $212 million. And that in fact means that 1 year of the revenue earned from selling Call of Duty on the PlayStation Store, that would comfortably fund both of those games. You could even say it would fund both of those games' full development budget twice over. Suffice to say then, Call of Duty is a very, very large platform, a very large product. It really does matter. Just look at that amount of money. Okay, let's talk about what we learned from Microsoft then. So they started by saying that they could walk away from the deal with Activision Blizzard entirely if they lost this injunction. Microsoft, in fact, agrees that they lost the console war, and they think they've lost it really since 2001, claiming that they're the third ranked console. They had a 16% market share in 2021, and they are 21% in current console installed base. Yeah. That quite is something. And in terms of how it's ran, Spencer actually claimed, "We do not model our success at the sole expense of other platforms. Instead, Xbox is ran as a profit and loss based business within Microsoft, so it cannot afford to take a massive loss like denying Call of Duty to PlayStation." So one of the things that people have said is, look, Microsoft has so much money. You've got Azure, you've got enterprise software. Surely then Xbox can just have more money than God, essentially. Go absolutely mad. Run Xbox to gain market share as a loss leader. Spencer then is pushing back against that, saying that no. Xbox is it's its own thing in Microsoft. It has to have profit, right? It's not ran like some crazy loss leader to get gaming market share, which I guess is, again, Phil Spencer trying to position himself as Xbox being within Microsoft. And yes, while it does have benefits from being inside Microsoft, it's not like it's an example of Microsoft being able to use their tremendous bulk to just gobble up the rest of the industry. Okay, some things then from Matt Booty, who is a real important guy over at Xbox. So here's an email that he said, "No effing way." This is a mail sent in 2019, and he said this to the idea of first-party games being on competing cloud services. So the idea of, say, NVIDIA GeForce Now, right? This is likely relating then to the removal of some games from GeForce Now. And the judge, of course, asked him, well, you said no effing way back in 2019. Why have you changed your tune now? And that's because he said the Xbox team has become less focused on content as the durable decider of success. And the judge asked for an example that supported this change, and Booty said Disney's ability to compete with Netflix. Kind of interesting. Booty also highlighted Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, and The Outer Worlds as being games that Microsoft had been obligated to bring to the PlayStation, and then did follow through on that obligation. I mean, of course, you did inherit that obligation. What matters is going forward, what do you do with those resources? And as an example for The Outer Worlds 2, Booty said that no decision had been made yet as to whether that would be an exclusive game or not. I mean, yes, Starfield's going to be an Xbox-only game. They obviously want to increase their market share with that. But you do just think about the amount of straight-up cash flow that they would make if they sold it in PlayStation, because no doubt more people would pick up the game that way. And then a final rather awkward thing is Mr. Booty saying to the CFO, Tim Stewart, in 2019, that they could spend Sony out of existence. Also said that Google was 3 to 4 years away from capable studios, and that Amazon has shown no ability to execute on game content. Harsh, but in many cases true. Okay, let's talk about Pete Hines then. He is a very important ZeniMax, and these are actually kind of awkward. Number one, Hines cannot confirm whether or not he directly reports to Phil Spencer, which is bizarre, and does at least corroborate some stories about like the level of agency that ZeniMax has. Anyhow, speaking of Redfall, he was asked about the AAA game Redfall, and Hines said, quote, there might be some opinions about the AAA part. That's awkward, harsh, and I suppose also true. But then again, Mr. Hines, it is in fact ZeniMax's fault that entire shit show happened to begin with, because it does stem from that era where ZeniMax just decided to make everything some sort of live service. What a wise move that was. To continue then, the court was shown an interview with GameSpot from 2021 where Hines explained that exclusivity for Starfield was not a factor until the Microsoft acquisition. This is basically an interview where he had apologized for the exclusivity and basically said there wasn't much that he could actually do about it. Quite rough. Again, Microsoft, they don't want to be seen to be doing anti-competitive feeling things. And then here we have Hines being like, yep, it's exclusive. Kind of, my hands are tied, not much I can do. But then a reveal also came. So they are making an Indiana Jones game with Disney, right? And Xbox actually changed their contract with Disney to make the Indiana Jones game be an exclusive, and of course they did that after the acquisition. So this is more games that would have been multi-plat no longer being multi-plat. And in regards to both of these, Hines basically said that there's a lot of efficiency that you get for only really having that one launch platform of the Xbox, not having to worry about, say, the PlayStation 5. He said, oh, look, with Starfield, we wouldn't be putting that out in 9 weeks if it was on another entire platform. In my opinion. Again, I would call out to you that the "in my opinion" bit truly is the core part of that statement. Doesn't need to be true, it's just factually his opinion. Anyway, the judge challenged this stuff then, saying, why are these games exclusive post-acquisition, but weren't exclusive before the acquisition? Of course, the why is the bit that matters, and Hines argued that as an independent studio, they needed to keep Disney happy with as broad an audience as possible regarding the Indiana Jones game. But that once Xbox came in, Xbox provided the confidence and security to try to amend that deal around exclusivity. But the funny thing is that internally, Hines has been kind of confused and seemingly aggravated, so ZeniMax were quite evidently told, listen, your shit's all exclusive now, including the likes of Redfall. Microsoft made this, they made this blog post, right, that was about plans for an open app store. In an internal email that they saw, this is what Hines said. I'm confused. Is the below not the opposite of what we were just told to do with our other titles? Did anyone at Xbox think of giving us a heads up? And then he goes on to say, Todd Howard's going to DICE in a few weeks. Don't you think a journalist might find him and press him on why the likes of Call of Duty or any Activision games, get to be multi-platform, but the Elder Scrolls 6 or Starfield don't? So Hines is just like, what the hell, man? Also, my boy Todd is going to be pounced on all of this by the journalists. So quite awkward. Now, these questions eventually were sent up the chain, basically resulting in a phone call with Phil Spencer, where, again, this messaging of exclusivity being case by case was actually used. And that's where they're actually saying that they can't confirm whether the Elder Scrolls 6 will be exclusive, because still technically it's a case-by-case basis thing. I feel like we all heavily suspect it is going to be exclusive, right? Because even though we do have this stuff from Phil saying it'll be case by case, there is what Xbox CFO Tim Stewart claimed he was told by Matt Booty in a 2021 meeting, which is that Phil Spencer stated that all ZeniMax games going forward would be Xbox exclusive, and that the amount of money that they would lose, right, that impact in their margins by not shipping those games in PlayStation, that those margins had all been considered. So certainly, it all seems a bit sus. Anyhow, to move on to Sarah Bond, who was brought in by Microsoft, this basically just is a big thing with them saying, no, cloud is not a distinct market. Cloud is the least used part of Game Pass Ultimate. We run it at a loss. In fact, all the cloud gaming is a feature set, because actually people just try games on our cloud service, and once they know if they want to actually play them, then they just download it to play it for real. The more that cloud looks like a big, essential part of the games market, the worse it is for Microsoft, because they have a really strong position there. Nice little cute, feature set that's good for them, but isn't the sort of thing we have to worry about in terms of competitiveness. The CMA in the UK, they firmly believe cloud is a massive, expanding future sector, and Microsoft's dominance in that is something that they are, particularly concerned about. And then to move on, we got some interesting stuff in contracts. So on those contracts, apparently Doug Browser reached out to see if he could get Call of Duty actually over on Nintendo. We haven't had that since the Wii U, as an example. Steam didn't want to sign a contract that lasted 10 years. And then those contracts, we've seen heavily redacted versions of them, but actually, according to the FTC's arguments, the writing, the actual way that these contracts are written, is potentially are problematic, because they've got loads of loopholes that Xbox can use to their advantage to, I suppose you could say, kind of renege on what the contracts were supposed to represent. As an example, the Nvidia deal clause shows that Microsoft can just unilaterally opt to renegotiate the contract. It says that Microsoft has resisted the testimony or discovery of the deals, and they want them to be excluded from the hearing, right? And they're saying that they are full of loopholes and speculative commitments. Basically, the contracts, in a way, are a load of wank. They just give Microsoft a load of power and discretion and all of this. And I mean, hey, why would they not want them to be a part of Discovery? Remember, Discovery is that part of a case where you basically you can just get files turned over, right? It's the sort of thing, if you hide files from Discovery, you get in a lot of trouble. I'm sure you remember a certain guy who had, was it Male Vitality Plus supplements? He was got because they basically hid a bunch of stuff. They kind of basically violated stuff in Discovery. They hid stuff from Discovery, and then the attorney, or their assistant, accidentally sent a bunch of documents to the opposition, which obviously, that exploded in a rather hilarious way. The point basically is, you can't really pull things out of Discovery, so Microsoft, they just don't want it to be part of that process, because clearly, well, they're literally acting as if there is something worth hiding in there. We should raise our eyebrows at that by default. To move on then, a few things from Satya Nadella. It was interesting. So Satya overall is the CEO of Microsoft, and he essentially said he does not like exclusives, that he does want all their apps everywhere. I mean, you think about, say, a lot of those Microsoft products actually getting pretty damn good Apple support. Clearly, whenever some deals had been shaken out and people were talking properly again. But he basically framed it as they're a low share player in the console market, and the dominant player has defined market competition using exclusives, and that's just the world that we live in. He says it's one that we've got no love for, but ultimately he's saying Sony are dominant, they became dominant with an exclusive strategy, therefore they have set the way competition exists in this market. That's just the way it is, them's the breaks. How can we fight exclusives without having exclusives? So it's very much just yeah, look, we don't like exclusives, but our hands are tied, so don't think badly of us for doing more exclusives, I guess. It's that sort of thing. Do I agree with Nadella? Yes. Do I also think that it's a little bit of a cop-out? Yes. But do I also think that you do basically need exclusives, really strong first-party ones, in order to get people over to your console? I mean, as Sony proves, yes, whoever has the best exclusives and has parity in multiplats, which of course they do because it's multiplats. There being rough parity is kind of definitional. Yeah, the person with the exclusives will win. It just works like that. As for a few things from Phil Spencer, he did confirm that Starfield was potentially going to be a PlayStation exclusive before Xbox bought ZeniMax. So that's a kind of interesting thing for him to say. Certainly, PlayStation exclusivity deals, they've been known to do it. Spencer also said that Elder Scrolls 6 is at least 5 years away, and they cannot commit or really say whether it will be exclusive or not. And he also made a statement while under oath about Call of Duty, basically just continuously saying I, under oath, absolutely under oath, it is my firm commitment, etc., that Call of Duty will be on the PlayStation 5, that full versions will be there. Right, so he just fully went really hard into that. But I think it's a helpful reminder that the things that these executives are saying in court are also things they've sort of lied about elsewhere. Here's a really good example. Phil Spencer previously said that Microsoft were not in any talks to buy certain studios, especially Japanese ones. So here's all the proof about them being in talks and wanting to buy Japanese studios. So, Microsoft were thinking about or in talks to acquire nearly 100 studios, all right? So, Zynga for their mobile games was on the cards at one point, but instead they chose King. Additionally, Behavior Interactive, Bohemia Interactive, where it was revealed that they're working on DayZ 2, Housemarque, Remedy Entertainment, Larian Studios, Rebellion Developments, Paradox Interactive, Square Enix, and not for their Final Fantasies, indeed, mostly for their mobile savviness, and Sega, as well as a few others, here as well, like, say, Bungie and IO Interactive. And actually on those, we learned that with IO Interactive, their upcoming RPG shooter fantasy game is called Project Dragon, and does seem to be an exclusive, and then their acquisition of Ninja Theory, that's the Senua Saga, the Hellblade people, that was $117 million. Now, the last section on acquisitions is maybe the most important thing here to audiences, because Phil Spencer and every gaming executive, they love to be charming people, and I'm sure they actually are charming, decent people who don't want to do wrong. It's just you got Phil Spencer, the dude, and then you got Phil Spencer, the C-suite level officer of Microsoft. He's got to put on his work hat, and that means he's going to have to do certain things. Some of those things may include not being fully truthful, because as an example, here we literally have Phil Spencer saying regarding acquiring or approaching Japan-based developers, he said, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I'm not on every meeting the team has, but at least not for me. So, you know, there's obviously some wiggle room in that, which I think is all just to say that here they're all saying things under oath. And if you're found to have lied under oath, you get in trouble, because the whole system kind of goes tits up if you do that. So, take what they say here as being like, yeah, this is actually personally important to them. They have to tell the truth. And there will be times where we then find out that things they've said to the press, things said in interviews, are either not true or perhaps do not contain all the truth, with the omissions being things that are actually important. And we should keep that in mind. It's totally cool to be like, yeah, Phil Spencer seems like a cool dude, pretty impressed with his career, sure he works really hard, sure he's a really good guy. But also, I mean, yeah, he's got his job, man. Well, obviously, he's going to be doing things to, you know, not to further his job, but to further Xbox. That's what his job is. So even if that means being specific in language or tactically truthful, you know, they're going to have to do that, because that's just the way that it is. So overall then, this was a pretty interesting thing. It was fun coming into work every morning and seeing, you know, what the latest updates from the trial were. The big business, I suppose, is going to be in August if all this goes forward. And, I mean, hey, for the final thing, no matter what, Bobby's going to win. Again, remember the termination clause that results in, like, billions just going to Activision Blizzard as a fee. So, yeah, the real lesson today. Number one, it's all about family. Number two, Bobby Kotick never loses, apparently. He's just indefeatable. Who knows? Powerful dude. Anyway, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed having this little bit of a dive into the sort of juicy drama of the games industry. It's fun, right? We can see executives' emails they've sent to each other. How crazy is that? All right, have a good day. Hope you found this to be entertaining. I'll see you next time.